Dan Lennington from the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty is standing by on the phone with me. Got a couple of things to talk with Dan about. One is the release of a handful of pages from the Nashville Shooter Manifesto, because Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty is involved in that case. And Dan, if we have time, I'd like to ask whether or not you think that what DPI is doing with teacher training is in violation of the Supreme Court decision that basically says reiterates you can't be racist. But let's start with the Nashville Manifesto. Does this do anything that any of this information was released? Does this do anything to the cases that are seeking the release of that information?
Yes, and thanks for having me. This does a lot. I think this does a lot of work in our case, and a lot of work to get transparency out of the FBI, which has been tarnished since, frankly, 2016 with their reputation. What has happened, just to remind your listeners, is that on March 27th, Audrey Hale killed 3 9-year-olds in the Covenant School in Nashville, Tennessee, and 3 adults, including substitute teacher, custodian, and a administrator. Immediately, the law enforcement officials said that there was a manifesto. And so we asked for the manifesto on behalf of our clients and did not get a copy. The FBI said that releasing any part of the manifesto would disrupt their criminal investigation, and they could just not turn over even one page of the manifesto because it would tip off people who they investigating. Now, 7 or 8 months later, we're in court against the FBI, and the FBI is still claiming that they can't release any part of this manifesto. But on Monday, Stephen Crowder released 3 pages of the manifesto that he had obtained from detectives in the Nashville Police Department. Other people have confirmed the authenticity of these documents, including the police chief of Nashville and 3 legislators who had seen actually the copy of the manifesto. And these pages reveal that the FBI had no good reason to withhold all of the manifesto, that their withholding of this information was likely politically motivated because, frankly, the messages of the shooter are messages that align with a lot of dangerous ideology that's being taught in our public schools now, a lot of anti-white ideology. I'm not going to read any expletives, but one of these pages says, kill those kids, those crackers, going to private fancy schools with those fancy khakis and sports backpacks with their daddy's Mustangs and convertibles. I wish to shoot you in your mop yellow hair. I want to kill all you little crackers, you and your white privilege. This is Audrey Hale. I don't know if she suffered from mental state, but she was definitely suffering from an anti-white bias, a belief that white kids had white privilege, that they deserved to die, and obviously a mentally ill person. But what this reveals is that our FBI, which has been under so much scrutiny, withheld these documents improperly from the public.
And they lied, by the way.
Speculate.
Yeah, I can speculate. I mean, you're the lawyer, you're working on this. I'll speculate. They lied because they wanted to cover up with it what ultimately we have now learned is a bombshell, and that the left was left-wing ideology, racism and lies, CRT and DEI motivated this psychotic person to murder little children. It convinced her to hate herself. She's white. It convinced her to hate herself. We can't have that coming out because, and I'll just throw in the DPI stuff. DPI is training teachers to train kids to think exactly like Audrey Hale. Maybe not to the point of murder, although they're pretty close, because the answer to black racism is white racism. And the answer to colonization is decolonization, which, quote, always involves violence. And that's some of the information that was being taught to teachers in Wisconsin just last week. So it matters, Dan, that we didn't see some of that manifesto when we could have been talking about it ahead of, say, teacher training with Bettina Love.
Yeah, this is, Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, we've only seen 3 pages of the manifesto. There's a lot more information out there. Also, Audrey Hale noted in her Death Day diary, which is one of the pages, that she had recorded a final videotape, and that is another. We're going to get that videotape. That's one thing we're asking for in our lawsuit. We're going to get the final videotape to see what she has to say. What did she record in her own words about why she was killing these little kids, and that she was targeting these little kids, and her beliefs that these children deserve to die because they are white and because they come from affluent families. And so I would say clearly that Audrey Hale was mentally ill and disturbed. But this ideology, this belief that little white kids who have go to school in their daddy's Mustangs and convertibles with their khakis and their sports backpacks, that these little mop heads, as she calls them, yellow hair kids, that somehow they are guilty in our society of being part of a system of oppression. And if you look at what Bettina Love says, who was the one paid by DPI to come and train our teachers, she says that school safety, charter schools, voucher schools, police in schools, Common Core accountability, book bans, school closings, all of these, race to the top, privatization, standardized testing, all these things are racist. And not only racist, they're part of a system and structure of oppression that is built and designed to keep minorities down. And that if you really believe that, we live in a system that is basically no different than slavery, and that every legislator or politician that supports these ideas are basically Hitler, then the idea that you take that to violence, we are seeing this in our culture is becoming more politically violent, I think, every month that goes by. People are willing to resort to violence more frequently, and I think we've seen that more in the treatment of Jews in the United States since the conflict broke out, since Hamas brutally murdered 1,500 Israelis. I think we are seeing more and more the true colors of the leftist agenda come out. And I'm not saying everybody who believes in systemic racism or oppression is violent, but these things in our society, these sort of infectious beliefs, do in some cases lead to violence, and they're something we need to monitor and keep a very close eye on, so they don't get out of control.
We have multiple examples, including the 2020 riots, but we absolutely have an example in Audrey Hale, and I think that's why they wanted to hide it. Hopefully, when we learn a little bit more about this teacher training, you can come back on, Dan. I do appreciate the time on the show today, but you think that this release helped your clients. I hope it does. I know this court case is ongoing, but hopefully this pushes it a little bit quicker than it has been moving so far. So thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it, Dan.
You're welcome. We'll keep you updated.